They say it's hard to find employees these days, but there are 17 people applying for one open job in Denver, and you get to decide who to hire. The office is pretty nice, but there's a stack of challenges waiting for whoever you choose to be Denver's next mayor. Rising crime, increasing homelessness, a housing affordability crisis. There are plenty of candidates with plenty of ideas, so let's hear them. Tonight, the first of 3 9 News debates in the race for Denver mayor. Together with MSU Denver, Claro, the Colorado Latino Leadership Advocacy and Research Organization, and the City of Denver's Fair Elections Fund. This is 9 News Presents The Race for Mayor.
Good evening and welcome to the King Center on the campus of MSU Denver. I'm Kyle Clark, joined by my 9 News colleagues, Anusha Roy and Marshall Zellinger.
Yeah, this is a 2-hour commercial-free debate featuring the 13 candidates participating in Denver's Fair Elections Fund. Denver voters overwhelmingly approved public financing of elections in 2018. This is the first year the Fair Elections Fund is in operation. It offers a 9-to-1 match for candidates who agree to fundraising limits and certain conditions, like participating in 2 debates. The goal was to encourage political outsiders to run for office. 13 of the 17 mayoral candidates on the ballot are participating in the Fair Elections Fund. We've invited them to debate here tonight. 4 additional candidates are not receiving Fair Elections Fund matches: Renata Behrens, Al Gardner, Andy Rougeau, and Robert Treda.
Some of the candidates here have elected titles, but as we do in all of our debates, we will not be using those titles because you will be deciding who should have the title of mayor. Candidates, you'll have 1 minute to answer most of the questions, with rebuttals and further discussion at our discretion.
Information for some of the questions tonight came from our partners at Claro's Latino Action Council, which is a group of Latino community organizations in Colorado. The questions themselves were prepared by the journalists of 9 News, and they have not been shared with anyone else in advance. We're now going to get started with 1-minute opening statements in a randomly generated order. Leslie Herod, you'll go first.
Thank you. Everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. It doesn't matter who you love, your income, your race, your age, your national origin. We all belong in this city. Denver is better because of our differences. That's who I am. That's what I've fought for. I was raised by a single mom in the armed forces, and when things got tough, 2 other people stepped in to help raise me. A law enforcement officer and a woman who was a boss in her own right. These are my parents. This is my family. It sounds complicated, but really it's not. Just like some of the issues facing us today. I know that together, we can tackle some of Denver's toughest issues. Denver is family. We all are family. And though we have our differences, we come together in tough times. But for far too long, the city has been run by special interests that don't put people first. As your next mayor, I will put people over politics and deliver real results for this city. I'm Leslie Herod, and together we can change Denver for the better.
Thank you.
Aurelio Martinez.
Hola. Yo me llamo Aurelio Martinez. Hello, everyone. I'm Aurelio Martinez. And I'm telling you, I want to explain to everyone why I'm running for Denver. The main reason I'm running for Denver is everyone out there knows Denver is broken. Denver is broken and needs a mayor that's going to be able to go into office and correct a lot of insufficiencies, correct the administration, correct everything so that Denver could become a town that it used to be. Beautiful, beautiful town. I just want everyone to know that we need to. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. we need to go ahead and put this city back on track. We need to tackle issues like homelessness. We need to tackle issues like housing and how we're going to keep people in Denver from leaving and bring people back into Denver. These are issues that we will take care of. And me as mayor, I'm not part of the status quo, and we can make change.
Thank you.
Our third opening statement is Thomas Wolf.
Thank you, Metro State, for hosting us tonight. Go Roadrunners. Thankfully, I apologize, but thankfully for me, 60 seconds kind of conforms to bullet points. So I would start off with, as your next mayor, I will end encampments. We need to understand that encampments are destroying our commercial property values, kind of just right over here in our central business district. They fund the property taxes from that fund 50% of DPS's budget, as well as a little bit over 10% of my city budget. Encampments are illegal. Encampments make our city unsafe and filthy, and that has to change. That's the business side of it. The human side is we have to acknowledge that this is a full-blown humanitarian crisis. These are Denver's neediest. The answer is to get them sheltered. I came over here tonight and passed Meow Wolf. That has been the current response. That's an odd name, but that's been the response from our administration to this crisis. Meow. If you want an authentic wolf to confront this, that's me.
Thank you.
We now go to Kelly Brough.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Kelly Brough, and I'm running to be the next mayor of Denver. And like so many families in Denver, mine has struggled too. I lost my father to violent crime. My family received government assistance when I was a kid to put food on our table and keep a roof over our heads. And my husband struggled with addiction our entire life together, and my girls and I lost him to suicide. These are the issues the next mayor of Denver must be prepared to address. But today's Denver also requires a mayor who has executive and relevant experience to run the city, and I do. I've been the CEO of the Denver Metro Chamber of Commerce with over 3,000 members. I was John Hickenlooper's chief of staff when he was mayor of Denver. I've run the HR department for the city. I know the city team and I love them. I've even served as a legislative analyst for all 13 members of the Denver City Council. I know this city inside and out, and I understand the issues, and I know on day one, I can hit the ground running. I'd love to have your support.
Thank you. Terrance Roberts.
My name is Terrance Roberts. I'm 46 years old. I am running to be the 46th mayor of Denver. I also agree that housing should be declared a crisis in this city. What I don't agree with is just destroying encampments without having somewhere for people to go, because where are they going to go? I am the only candidate that is saying we do need to shift our conversation from just affordable housing to more public social housing. Poverty is the precursor for our second biggest issue in this city, which is youth and gang violence. We just had a youth shot in his head at East High School. We had another shooting at Emily Griffith right before that. The biggest precursor to the gang violence is domestic violence. The biggest precursor to domestic violence is poverty. We need a mayor who is going to present a proper budget to city council every year that includes ending the cycle of poverty in our city with our public safety portion. We need a housing budget more than 2% of our public safety, which is what we've been getting for the last decade. Vote for Terrance Roberts for Denver mayor to see tangible change.
Thank you.
Kwame Spearman.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kwame Spearman. I'm the CEO and co-owner of Tattered Cover, Denver's neighborhood bookstore. I'm so excited to be here tonight to talk about my vision and how I can become your neighborhood mayor. But before I get started, I want you to take a few seconds and just think about 2 or 3 things that you love about your neighborhood. For my parents who live in Montclair, I think my dad would say that it was the ability to buy a home in Montclair after he left the segregated South. I think my mom would say it was our neighborhood's affordability that allowed us to live there for the 37 years that she worked for Denver Public Schools. But I also want you to think about your neighborhood. Is it headed in the right direction or the wrong direction? Quite frankly, I'm in this race right now because I'm not convinced that our neighborhoods are living up to their full potential. And as your neighborhood mayor, I plan to make the tough choices on the issues that are affecting our neighborhoods the most: homelessness, safety, and affordability. Because I fundamentally believe that your neighborhood makes our city.
Thank you. Mike Johnston.
Thank you. How many of us have had that experience when you're walking through downtown Denver and you're holding your kid's hand and you round the corner and suddenly you happen upon a group of 3 or 4 people who are huddled around an encampment trying to keep themselves warm, and you feel your kid hold your hand a little tighter and look up to you with that combination of fear and heartbreak, right? As if to say to you, like, Dad, why are you letting this happen? We don't have to let this happen. Right? No one should be homeless in Denver. We have a moral obligation to make sure we can get people off the streets and into housing. And we know that we can end the practice of people having to sleep in public places, in yards, in parks, and on your front doorsteps. And when we do that, when we put people into housing, you get back a city where your kids can walk around with joy again and hold your hand, and you can be proud of the city they built, And most of all, you know that they'll be proud of the city we've built. We can do that as the city, and that's why I'm running to be the next mayor.
Thank you.
Chris Hansen.
Good evening. I'm State Senator Chris Hansen, and I'm running to be Denver's next mayor because I believe we need to build a city that works. And right now, I'm feeling frustrated. Like many of you at home, I'm frustrated because it doesn't feel like Denver's living up to its full potential. We need to build a safer, more affordable, and greener Denver, and we're just not getting the job done. As an engineer, as a private sector, as a public sector leader, I have delivered for Denver time and time again, and that's exactly what I want to do as your next mayor. In fact, in this last state budget, as a leader on the Joint Budget Committee at the Capitol, I brought billions of dollars to the aid that Denver needs to succeed. And now we have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, along with federal dollars from recent federal legislation, to make generational change in Denver. But the city has to do its part if this city is going to work. We can't waste this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to address housing, to address transit, to address the homelessness crisis. This is our moment to succeed. This is the moment we invest in our kids and our future. That's why I'm running to be Denver's next mayor.
Thank you. Ian Tafoya.
Hi, my name is Ian Thomas Tafoya, and I'm excited to be here at Metro State. I'm a graduate from Metro State. Shout out to the political science students who put this on today. I was once a political science student here at Metro State. You could run for mayor one day. It's definitely available to everybody from this Hispanic serving institution. I'm grateful for Colorado, who has been a great partner of mine. I am the Colorado State Director for Green Latinos, an environmental justice organization that has taken on the biggest polluters and worked to lower your bills at home while cleaning up the air. My background, I started here on campus, organizing for composting. And this year, we passed a law that will impact 31 million people by bringing recycling and composting to everyone. I'm the kind of candidate who sees a problem and immediately starts to take action. But we don't do it alone. I also studied Native American studies here. And as a Native American, I believe in calling in all four directions: white, black, yellow, red, elders, youth. Together, we come to the solutions. And I also have the experience in working in 3 branches of local government and every level of government. I'm here for you.
Thank you.
Trinidad Rodriguez.
I'm Trinidad Rodriguez. I was born and raised in West Denver by a hardworking single mom. We hit speed bumps along the way. But like many Denverites, the city helped us through the tough times. And I wanted to pay it forward. So when I started my career and working in finance 25 years ago, I volunteered the entire time for all of those 25 years, serving the city's most efficient and important civic and nonprofit organizations. The funding and financing I helped secure built affordable housing communities and schools, clinics, and hospitals that went on to serve tens of thousands of Denverites. And that really sets me apart from the rest of the candidates here. Denver is in tough times, and I'm ready to keep fighting, just like I've been fighting for the last 25 years, to build my vision, which is a city where every Denverite, regardless of the neighborhood they're in, whether it's a single West Side like me or a place with more advantage, to achieve their version of success.
Thank you. Jim Walsh.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jim Walsh. I'm so happy to be here, very excited to be here. I want to welcome all of my colleagues to my campus. I've been a part of this campus since 1993 when I was a graduate student, and I've taught here at CU Denver for 25 years. I'm in the political science department. A little bit about myself. I'm from Western Pennsylvania. I'm from a very large Irish Catholic family of 9, a steel town, blue-collar family. Made my way to Duke University on a wrestling scholarship and landed in a place of great wealth and privilege, and that sort of gave me a class consciousness that has never left me. I moved to Boulder in 1990 to study poetry at Naropa. So I became the world's first wrestler poet. And some of my students are here tonight. I'm so excited to see them here. This campaign is truly grassroots, all student-led, student-driven, student-built. If you're interested in that, look at my webpage.
Thank you.
Debbie Ortega.
Good evening, Denver. I'm here to ask for your support. I have worked in this city for many years. I ended up here in Denver, Colorado when I was 13 years old after my dad was killed in a mine cave-in and my mom remarried and we moved to Denver. And the commitment that I saw that my dad did in giving service back to other coal miners when they were injured, and my mother who worked in a food bank, that oftentimes that food ended up on our table. That commitment to service is what I've given to this city, and I've worked on large and small projects from housing affordability to addressing the needs of our unhoused population as the executive director of our Homeless Commission, and I'm committed to addressing these issues. I have the experience in having served this city for many years. I am ready to hit the ground running because I know how our city works, and I'm prepared to step in and work with our business community, our residential neighbors, and city council to get this work done.
Thank you.
Final opening statement, Lisa Calderon.
Good evening. I'm Lisa Calderon, and I would like to thank the organizers and also the people of the Arapaho, Cheyenne, and Ute tribes whose stolen land we reside on. My daughter, Savannah, who's a member of the Navajo Nation. It's good to be home. This is where I started my career and my activism as a single parent, Black Student Alliance president who organized with UMAS and MECHA. You know, even back in the day, I was able to afford a 2-bedroom apartment on food stamps and public support. I would like students today, educators, and our critical workers to have that same opportunity. I am running because I have been a nonprofit executive for 20 years, including running the city's reentry program, running domestic violence programs, and running Emerge Colorado for Democratic women to run for office. I am running for a new Denver, not the same power holders, not the same false choices. Vote for me, Lisa Calderon.
Thank you so much. All right, that's all the time we have tonight. This race is a little unusual because there are so many candidates for starters, and most of you seem to agree on what the key issues are. And that's actually kind of wonderful because it means that we can spend our time talking about solutions. For the first time tonight, I'm going to ask you some group questions, where I ask you to raise your hand if you agree with a statement, so the folks at home can kind of get a basic idea of where people are. And then we're going to dive into some details. And we're going to start with the issue of homelessness. Every candidate will be heard on this issue. Please raise your hand if you will forcibly clear encampments that are in violation of Denver's urban camping ban. So I'm calling out the no hands for folks at home with small TVs: Jim Walsh, Ian Tafoya, Leslie Herod, Terrance Roberts. Please raise your hand if you will forcibly arrest or commit people who do not agree to go into shelter or housing options provided by the city or refuse to go into treatment for mental health or drug issues.
Caveat.
So the folks that I see who are saying that they would forcibly arrest or commit those folks are Kwame Spearman, Trinidad Rodriguez, Thomas Wolfe, Debbie Ortega, Kelly Brough. Thank you.
No explanation.
Please raise your hand if you believe that most of the people living on Denver streets want to live in a home. That appears to be everyone. Please raise your hand if you believe that it is the responsibility of government to provide a home for everyone who wants it.
Shelter?
Shelter or a home, that's fair. Shelter or a home. Should the government provide shelter or a home for anyone who wants it? I believe that was everyone except for Chris Hansen. So many of you are promising a tougher stance on clearing encampments. So we're going to ask you to contrast your approach to Mayor Hancock's current approach of the homeless sweeps, the voluntary offers of shelter for people, sporadic arrests for various crimes, or involuntary detox or mental health holds for some people. None of that has solved the encampment problem in this city. We'd like those of you who say that you will end encampments to explain very specifically how you're going to do that beyond the measures being taken by the Hancock administration. And we welcome rebuttals from folks who disagree. Kelly Brough, the first question is for you. What happens under your plan when someone on the streets says that they don't want the shelter that you're offering and there's no grounds to involuntarily commit them? Are they going to be arrested for something? Will they just be moved along as they are now? How does that work? And if people end up in jail instead of on the streets, is that an improvement in your eyes?
Yeah, I think what's really important on this issue is to recognize the majority of service providers in our region will tell you they believe the vast majority of people living on the street are going to go voluntarily to safer locations. The big issues that prevent it today are they can't be with their family or their partners or their community. They can't be with their pets. and they're not safe in our current shelters. So I'm going to end unsanctioned camping by providing temporary sanctioned locations until we can build what we need.
And then what happens with the folks who say no to that offer?
So as mayor, you still have an obligation to keep everyone safe. And so if somebody can't make that decision for themselves based on mental health or addiction issues, I still think we have an obligation as government to make it for them until they can. So I would still take them in. If somebody just refuses, I still believe we have to take them in, and I would liken it to how we do drug court today. Today, when you come into drug court, we give you an off-ramp where you can choose alternatives, but we don't give you the choice to live in inhumane conditions. I would do the same here.
So for those folks who are not going to be taken in for detox or mental health treatment, who just don't like the choice you're offering them, somebody can't be arrested for disagreeing with the mayor. What would you arrest them for?
Well, there's no camping. And what we're saying in our city is it's inhumane to allow you to live in those conditions, and we're going to change that.
Mike Johnston, you're pledging to end homelessness, not just the encampments. That's an estimated 4,700 people total experiencing homelessness, not just the 1,300 who are unsheltered. Mayor John Hickenlooper made the same pledge 20 years ago. How will you succeed where Hickenlooper failed?
Yeah, there's two things we've gotten wrong on this. One of this is the reason that the current camping ban practice of moving people is not working is because there's no place to move them. What we know is actually what these folks need are access to housing. So the way we solve this is by actually building housing. I would build micro communities of tiny homes, 40 to 60 each. We've done this and we know it works. And the reason why it works is you also allow people to move while preserving a sense of community. Right now you open one unit at a time and then you go to an encampment where 12 people are living and offer one person a house. They might say no. What we know is if you open communities that have 40 to 60 units and you go to 2 or 3 encampments and allow those people to move together in a way that preserves that sense of community and then provides all the wraparound services people need. That means you have access to drug treatment, to mental health support, to housing, to long-term workforce training. We know that those systems work, and we know that people want that option for a safe, stable place to live. When we offered this to people, we had 300 units, 800 people signed up for them, and a year later, 86% of those people were still successfully housed. That's why we know it works.
So again, as we talked about at the beginning, privately with the candidates, this is a debate and not a forum. So we encourage you to talk with one another where you have respectful disagreements. Just let me know when that occurs. Chris Hansen.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. I really wanted to add on to that, add on to this discussion, because housing alone is not going to get the job done. Just providing a tiny house or just providing a unit is going to perpetuate many of the problems that folks are experiencing, which is why last year in the state budget, we made a huge investment in the new Ridgeview facility east of town, stable housing with wraparound services on site, get folks out of the context in which they're struggling. That's how we have success, and that's what we're seeing around the country in places like San Antonio. That's what's working. Let's not perpetuate just housing.
Trinidad Rodriguez.
Thank you, Kyle. The reality is the thing that we're not doing nearly enough of is addressing and serving, providing health care and mental health and addiction treatment services to those people who have these conditions. It's often the case that these conditions prevent people from actually accepting treatment and help. And so we need a solution that actually starts to serve this group of people. It is inhumane to continue to allow people to live on the streets in serious danger to themselves and or others. And in the meantime, the hazards are rampant. And so we need the ability to take people into treatment on an involuntary basis. I'm excited to see that the mayor has actually started talking about doing just this.
Thank you very much. We're going to get one more quick answer here. A reminder, everyone will get their own individual question on this topic because it's so important. Kwame Spearman.
So we've got to recognize that right now there are two groups of our unhoused on our streets. The first are people who are being failed by the system. And we've got to innovate, we've got to build micro homes, we've got to do more for those individuals. But we've also got to recognize that because we are not enforcing our laws, we've become a magnet for people who are exploiting the system. Now, I don't know if it's 51% or 47% or 15%, but I do know that we are not going to make progress on homelessness until we recognize that there are some people who are exploiting the system. And we've got some tough choices ahead as how we want to deal with those individuals. But that's a key part of this debate and something that I'm willing to have a conversation with tonight.
So just to follow up, we're going to ask you about this in just a moment. Not only have you said that people are exploiting the system, you've said, quote, we're creating conditions where in many cases it can be more enticing to go to an encampment than to get a job. Can you tell us how you came to that conclusion and whether conversations with people experiencing homelessness or direct service providers informed your point of view?
So Denver Homeless Out Loud, which is a far more progressive organization than I am, did a survey and said 52% of our unhoused would prefer to live in a tent than other housing options. They also said that 18% of our unhoused will only live in tents. You know, Kyle, if you think about what we have to pay our workers right now and what that means to live in the city, the transportation ecosystem that we've got in our city, you can start understanding why people are making decisions that put them in a situation where they're not housed right now. We've got to have a holistic approach to having affordable housing, to having good paying jobs, but we've also got to have laws that are enforced that deter people from living a life where they're unhoused.
Thank you. Our next question is for Debbie Ortega.
Your vision to address homelessness is revolving around resources and ending encampments by connecting people to wraparound services. But if people say no to that help and we still see camps standing in Denver, what as mayor would you do then?
So there are a couple things I would be doing different. First of all, we haven't really utilized our workforce arm to help people get back to work. And not everybody on the streets are chronic homeless individuals. For example, we've been housing people in motels and 24/7 shelters that have had their lives stabilized for the last 2 years. And I would be utilizing our workforce arm to assist those individuals to get back to work towards self-sufficiency, because our ARPA funding is going to be running out, and when that disappears, the general fund in the city cannot sustain those costs. So I want to help move them to self-sufficiency. We have programs like the Denver Day Works program that Bayard Enterprises has done, where they have actually taken people off the streets and put them to work. And a number of those people have gotten into full-time jobs, and many of them are now housed. So there are programs that work, and that's one example of what I would continue to support so that we help people get back to work.
One of the things we've heard from advocates is that we do have successful programs, but we're not successful at scaling up. So how would you do that?
I think part of it is not just a funding issue, but the reality is we have an array of training programs across our community that are private sector as well as publicly funded. And we need to pull those all together because we have employers that are dying for workers. So what we need to do is look at how we close the gap, address the needs of the individuals. In many cases, we need employment navigators to help them. And as they're getting stabilized, and in this case, they're stabilized in housing, we want to get them stabilized in permanent housing.
Thank you. Lisa Calderon, you have called the current sweeping policy mean-spirited, and you've talked about the need to meet folks who are experiencing homelessness with more outreach services. I'm sure the Hancock administration would say that that's happening now. So what would fundamentally change on this issue if you were in charge?
We would actually use evidence-based practices, and that's not happening now. And in response to some of my colleagues up here, I'm also a criminal justice professor and a 20-year service provider, domestic violence victims who find themselves homeless, people coming out of jail who find themselves homeless. And with all due respect, these folks don't know what they're talking about. If Kwame was a student of mine, he would get an F for analysis of that report. That's not what Denver Homeless Out Loud said. What they said was, basically, if it's a choice between going to shelter or living in a tent, they would prefer to be in a tent. And part of that is exposure to COVID. You know, we need to start treating people with dignity. And this is a very paternalistic responses we're getting here. I've been formerly homeless as a teen, escaping domestic violence from an abusive step-parent. So when I hear terms like those people, you're talking about me.
So I think I should be able to respond to this. More stats from what Denver Homeless Out Loud said is that there are more people who are chronically homeless today In fact, 4x more people than who are suffering from homelessness due to domestic abuse or due to problems with their family or due to being a veteran. And respectfully, Lisa, I think I said exactly what you said. There are people who are preferring to live in tents than to go to shelter. Let's talk about our shelter system. It is now open for 24 hours a day. It has capacity. You can have a shower there. You can put your belongings in that shelter. And people aren't going. We've got to face an unfortunate truth. It breaks my heart when I see tents outside of Tattered Cover. But if we allow those tents to stay outside of our businesses, we are going to lose customers. Ask yourself in this audience, or if you're watching this, if you frequent businesses that have homeless encampments outside of them. And if you don't go into those businesses, we can't pay our employees. And those same employees... Thank you.
Thank you. We've heard a bit from you on this issue. I want to return to Lisa Calderon just to wrap this up quickly here. You've described the Hancock administration's policies as mean-spirited. What you said about the folks up here on the stage is that you just don't think that they understand the issue. Do you sense a mean-spiritedness here, or simply you think you have expertise they don't have?
I do have expertise that they don't have. I have lived experience that they don't have. I don't think people are intentionally trying to be mean to people, but that's the impact. That's been the impact of the camping ban that has not been effective. We've had it for 10 years. We have plenty of data that shows that that does not work. What does work is actually what I would do, replace the street homeless teams, street enforcement teams, with crisis intervention responders so that we aren't just leaving people out there, we are moving them into homes. I've organized with Denver Homeless Out Loud and other homeless rights organizations. We believe in master leases. So there is an array of things that we could do that we have not done and chosen not to do.
Thank you.
Next question is for Thomas Wolf. Ending the urban camping is your single biggest campaign issue. You said the city has offloaded too much of this work to nonprofits, and you say that you will confront and control encampments. Why is confrontation the way to solve this issue, and then what is the role for nonprofits?
Yeah, so, the meow I referred to has gone on for 3 years. Okay, that's clearly not working. The numbers say that when you're confronting or trying to help these people, it breaks between chemically dependent, mental, and criminal, and sometimes all three, which is a really tough lift. So that you need to triage, you need to bring the right resource to bear in a different situation. Those first two it needs to be clinical healthcare workers, probably with a backup from security, from our safety, and then the criminal. Obviously, that we need to enforce law and order. We've been lax about that, so then people push that envelope. We need to basically create a truce, have an armistice with this population and say, now we are going to enforce laws. We have a new administration. Sorry we didn't enforce that before. You can either come to shelter or, move on, okay? And then, but the next time, you won't have the same choice if we find you doing the same thing.
Chris Hansen, you have the other end of the spectrum of this from a nonprofit standpoint. You've told me that you want to rely on nonprofits for this topic and that you want to audit how much Denver is spending and who's getting it and what are we getting in return. So what's the city's responsible for? What is the city's responsibility to do in-house versus what you're outsourcing to these nonprofits that you're not sure if you're getting bang for the buck?
Yeah, Marshall, thank you. We've kind of left out the nonprofits in the discussion so far, so I really appreciate the question. I've had a chance to spend time with some of the great nonprofits in this city. They are doing amazing work, and I had a chance to spend a day with the Salvation Army last fall. They have a project where they're really focusing in on families experiencing homelessness. They've had a 90% permanent housing placement rate. It is incredible success that they've had, and they're focused and they're effective. And that's exactly what I'm talking about when I say let's audit the spending that we're having right now, $250 million this year, and the numbers are going up. We have to do better, and our nonprofit partners are having some success, so let's double down where we're seeing that and pull back funding, just like we did at the state budget last year when I was on the JBC. Bring that evidence-based, that data-based budgeting to bear, and we're going to make much more progress. And there's some great nonprofits. We need to double down where we're seeing that great success and partner, because the city can't do it all by itself.
Thank you.
Leslie Herod, when it comes to helping people experiencing homelessness, you have said that the first step is to getting permanent housing is to get into safe spaces. So what happens then if someone says no to all of the safe spaces you offer?
Yeah. Well, I think first it's important to listen to the words that are being used on this stage. I think a lot of folks here, they want you to believe that homeless folks are part of a different population or they're a statistic. But we've got to remember that people are people. The people living on the streets are not just a statistic. They are real human beings. We can't incarcerate ourselves out of homelessness. It won't work, and it's going to cost a lot of money to do so. I don't know how many Denverites want to build more prisons just to house people who just want housing. The majority of people who are unhoused today on the streets, living in cars, and those you don't see, who are couch surfing from place to place, like my sister did when she was addicted, need access to housing. Denver, DPS, and RTD own the majority of vacant lots in this city. We could build permanent social housing, we could build temporary housing for folks, and we can do it today. We can do it now, and we should.
Trinidad Rodriguez, you brought this up earlier, so let's go back to it. Involuntarily taking someone. You want to do that and involuntarily take people experiencing homelessness to a field hospital. What will be the criteria for you to choose to commit someone on a mental health hold beyond that person simply saying, no, I'm good on the sidewalk?
Yeah, it's a clinical determination whether someone is of danger to themselves or others. And that is exactly the idea, is that this is a health question. We would not kick somebody out or arrest somebody waiting in the waiting room of Denver Health. Why would we deny someone these very important access to health services living in the most dangerous conditions and stand by and watch? That is the criminal thing. That is the inhumane thing. And we have the ability to develop a treatment that meets the standard of care, that is high quality and humane. And our ethical burden is high to make sure it's high quality and humane, and that it does actually result in true healing for people, so that they can go on to the large ecosystem of service providers out in our community for a longer-term recovery and healing among those groups. 853 people died on our streets in the last 5 years alone, according to the Denver Medical Examiner's Office. This has got to stop.
I just want to be clear, though. You're coming through the sidewalks. There's no option. You're either getting involuntarily committed into an ER or perhaps arrested, but you're not being left behind. You can't just say no.
No, I'm saying if you're not of danger to yourself or others, then all the other techniques and ways that we do to use to address homelessness. This is in addition to our existing suite of services. This is the gap that's missing.
Thank you.
Ian Tafoya, you've been involved in really tough negotiations about all kinds of different issues over the years as a community advocate. Can you level with us about what is really blocking progress on this issue that maybe is not always talked about? Like, what is the sticking point and why Denver is having such a difficult time with homelessness?
I really appreciate that question. I am a nonprofit leader for a nonprofit that serves the unhoused called the Headwaters Protectors that brings public health and sanitation. That's step number one. The people on our streets right now, there's a big difference between what I call solidarity and charity. There are a lot of people who are coming down and bringing food to the encampments. They don't have refrigerators and they don't have trash service. During the pandemic, the public restrooms were closed. We still haven't built them, and I ran for city council on it 8 years ago. So what did we do? We gathered the arts community together, we brought them out, and we said, yes, we can deliver water to the people, we can clean up the trash, and we brokered a partnership with the city all these years later. I think what it is it's leadership. We talk about scaling these opportunities. I'm so great to hear so many people are talking about this now. I offered a plan during the pandemic to use ARPA money and Save Our Stages money to use unemployed festival workers to scale the outdoor sites and bring stability to people. To answer your question about what do you do when someone won't move, I have direct experience every Sunday helping people move out of bike lanes, away from people's businesses. It starts with conversations. And if you don't get it today, go back tomorrow, because that's what equity is really about.
Thank you. I'm going to bring in Aurelio Martinez. At a recent debate, you said we have to stop thinking shelters and start thinking solutions. Are you suggesting closing shelters? And if not, how is a shelter not a solution?
The shelters should be used as temporary shelters, because that's what they're for, to keep them out of the street, keep them out of the cold, keep them out of the danger. The solution is getting them out of homelessness. And I think we're all missing the point here. We can't arrest anyone for not committing a crime, for walking on the street, but we can enforce the camping ban by stopping tents and encampments from being on our sidewalks. And that's what we need to do. We need to get a program, part of the Department of Safety, that will have a patrol to go out there and stop tents from being put up before they congregate and become blocks and blocks long. You move them and you direct them to the shelters where they can stay out of the cold, or where they can get food and where they can get what they want. The answer to that is we need to look at assisted living for the homeless. It's here and it's available now today, but it's not widely known. It's assisted living for people that we can take out of homelessness and get back into society.
I just want to back up just a little bit. It sounds what you described is what this administration has tried. So how do you do what you just described and be successful where the Hancock administration perhaps has failed?
That's exactly where I was leading to, and I'm glad you asked that question, okay, because you gave me a little more time. Assisted living. When we talk about assisted living, you think about elderly, you think about disabled. There is assisted living now for the homeless. And homeless that are experienced because they have a loss of income or they got mental issues, they go to these assisted livings and they have a home. They're not under a shelter. They actually have a home where they come home, they sleep, they go out, look for work, and they work. This is what we have to do to get them out of homelessness so they can get back on their feet.
Thank you.
Jim Walsh, you've said that Denver has the money to provide a home for everyone. That suggests you think the issue here is a lack of will.
Yes, I think this conversation should not even begin until we directly confront the idea that our unhoused neighbors are insane, criminal, or freeloaders. Until we confront that idea, we can't even have this conversation. I agree with Lisa, the paternalism here is thick. And the first thing I would want to do as mayor is welcome unhoused voices to the table, to policy-making tables, and ask them what is best for them, what solutions can they imagine. One survey I saw from House Keys suggested that over 90% of people on the streets desperately want housing. So I don't know where this 50% number is all about, but I think housing first has to be any mayor's focus immediately.
Terrance Roberts, as mayor, you said that you would want to dedicate areas for sanctioned encampments with electricity, lighting, washing machine, and dryers. Where would you envision setting up sanctioned encampments, and how many in Denver?
You know, I have to be honest, I don't have that answer. Like right now, we're going to put them right here near the Platte River. But we have plenty of space in far northeast Denver. We have areas near the Platte River. We may have to do eminent domain. This current administration is using eminent domain to displace Globeville, Elyria, Swansea residents to build a legacy project and to build out I-70. We're not only going to do safe encampments, because that's the bottom level of housing that's needed. It's good to hear a career politician, Ms. Harrod, glean off of my platform to say we need more social housing. I'm happy to hear her say this. And we've been saying when the career politicians are saying what the activists and community organizers are saying, we know it's time for change in Denver. So yes, we will have encampments that have all of those amenities for people. They will take themselves to those encampments, but we have to focus on public housing. No one's moving from a tent on Colfax and Broadway to so-called affordable housing. Affordable for who? It's affordable for who could pay for it. And our AMI in Denver is too high. This is a middle-class city. We have to fight poverty with our public safety budget.
And I'll just jump in.
So for the money that would be set aside for a sanctioned encampment, you just talked about the importance of housing.
Yes.
Why not use that money towards affordable housing?
So talking about money, so we cannot use our public safety budget to build more public housing. Anybody who's been working in a municipal setting understands this. We need a public banking system. If you look at what Los Angeles is doing, if you look at what New York City is doing. If you look at Philadelphia with their issues on Kensington Avenue, we can install a public banking system in Denver. It will democratize banking in our city, and it will give us extra income for our infrastructure. We need to make Denver a 24-hour city. Studies have shown it is safer for homeless people, it is safer for our law enforcement, and it is safer for violence all around. So these types of things will bring more sales tax into the city, and we can pay for housing outside of our general fund.
We're going to have a couple of quick wrap-up thoughts on this issue before we move to another pressing issue. Leslie Herod, you were mentioned by name. Yes. Terrance Roberts essentially said you ripped off his social housing plan.
Well,
that was my word. Did you say
I appreciate and respect my good friend Terrance Roberts, and it's Herod, of course, but you know that. But I actually will say that this campaign started by listening to the people of Denver. We hosted a housing salon where we had people present 3 big ideas, 2 hours, transform a city. And one of the ideas that was brought to us was social housing. And I gotta tell you, they're right. It is a good solution. And regardless of if you're a career politician or not, what I will tell you is we know that Denver's next mayor should listen to the people. And the people do bring solid solutions. I'm not going to lie, I've worked with many people on this stage to put solutions in place and deliver for Colorado and Denver. It's not stealing ideas, Terrance. Let's work together on it. Ian, you know I got you. There's so many people on this stage that have great ideas, but also in our communities. But I want to say one thing about this. They want you to believe that sending people into treatment will be like sending folks off to Betty Ford. Trini Rodriguez is right. It is about getting a field hospital together. And as someone whose parents worked in field hospitals, this is not something that we want in the heart of our city for those who are unhoused. It will cost too much money, and I tell you what, that is not a place where you can provide good treatment with good outcomes. We know that. That's a triage place. And where do people go at night? Where do people go at night? There's still not solutions.
Thank you. Let's do the social housing thing right now. We're going to talk about it later, but let's do it right now. So for folks who are unfamiliar with the concept, roughly speaking, it's the idea that the city essentially acts as the developer and is able to develop properties to create affordable housing, other forms of shelter without necessarily having the burden of profit that you have in the private sector. Seattle just this week voted on that concept, and it currently is on pace to pass in Seattle, but they don't have funding for it. It's just an idea there. So by show of hands, who here believes that Denver should get into the business of social housing and developing property itself? Hands up high, please.
Is this nobody pays for anything to live in the housing?
No, oftentimes it would be an income cap, like I think Seattle's income cap is about 30%, but just the idea that Denver would get into the development business itself.
Well, but Kyle, are we fully funding the housing?
Seattle's not. I'm interested in whether you're interested in the idea. Are you curious or interested in the idea, or do you think it should be left to the private sector? That's the question.
Awesome. We're doing that right now with our shelters.
We are doing it.
We already passed the statewide ballot measure last year that will do this. So Proposition 123, which we passed last year, will allow public entities to be the investor in these housing developments, which allows you to take out the profit motive. So instead of dollars going to out-of-state investors at 20% returns, you allow CHAFA, which is the housing authority, to invest in these. We spent 2 years developing that idea, passed it in Proposition 123. There'll now be $50 million a year coming to Denver to do exactly that. So I'm definitely a supporter.
The cost real quick from Thomas Wolf. We're going to go to a couple other people real quick, then move on to the next issue.
This is horribly flawed. The private sector doing this, the cost is the profits. That's economics 101. For the public sector to do it, the inefficiencies, delays, you name it. This is on the private sector side. They by far and away do the most, and the reason that the profits keep being competed is somebody else wants to do that. There's no force on the government side to bring it to market in a competitive way.
Thank you. So a number of you have talked about how the opioid epidemic is intertwined with homelessness. A number of you have talked about the fact that people who are experiencing homelessness should not be labeled as necessarily having substance misuse disorders. But we certainly know the impact that opioids are having on our community. The state legislature is considering a bill that would allow Denver to create a supervised drug injection site. Similar effort failed at the legislature in 2019. Mayor Michael Hancock was initially on board, then he backed off. Please raise your hand if you support the idea of Denver creating a supervised drug injection site.
We already have one.
You believe that we already have one?
We already have one.
In the sense that the kind that the state legislature would need to approve? Because that would be operating illegally. You're talking about a different type of harm reduction. It's not the type of the supervised injection site that would require legislative approval. And bless you all who kept your hands up that entire time.
This question is for Leslie Herod and Chris Hansen. As state representative and state senator, you will be voting on the supervised injection site bill if it does proceed through the legislature. More than a third of the legislators at the Capitol have signed on as a sponsor. Leslie Herod, you supported this idea years ago, but you're not listed as a sponsor on the current bill. Why is that?
I support supervised use sites. In fact, I actually went with a group from Caring for Denver and some other folks with the Harm Reduction Action Center and others to go see the supervised use sites throughout in Vancouver. I went with my colleague, Senator Brittany Pedersen, and we saw firsthand how they can work, but also ones that don't work. Working with law enforcement in Vancouver, we understood that when you have supervised use sites, it actually provides a lot of information to understand where drugs are coming from, what's in them, but it also, most importantly, saves lives. Saves lives. What we know is that someone is not going to get help when they're looking for their next fix. What they found is that instead, when people use, they're then more open and receptive to then getting treatment right away. Supervised use sites in Vancouver have the use site on the first floor and then treatment up top. And they can help people actually recover. Folks, again, like my sister, who was addicted to drugs and needed that support and that help.
Real quickly, though, if you are supportive of this idea, why aren't you a bill sponsor this time?
So likely when that bill passes, I will be added on as co-sponsor. There are amazing new legislators in the legislature right now that are leading that bill and our sponsors today. I look forward to seeing that bill on appropriations and as it goes through the process. But I've read the bill and I will be a yes vote.
The next question is for Chris Hansen. You're a hard no on supervised drug injection sites. Why is that, and have you talked to folks in harm reduction about this idea and explored alternatives?
Yeah, thank you. I am opposing the bill. I obviously haven't signed on as a co-sponsor, and I have taken a look at some of the examples, the Vancouver site. There's other places that have tried this around the globe, and I think the results have been really mixed. And I think what we have seen work well is what the state has done in places like Fort Lyon, which we are now replicating in a place east of town called Ridgeview, which is stable housing with wraparound services and drug treatment on site. That is what's showing long-term results. And the Fort Lyon results have been really, I think, a great success for the state of Colorado and is a better approach than starting safe injection sites in urban areas.
Have you talked with harm reduction folks?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of advocates that are at the state capitol working on this bill. That's exactly the process that we have. It's great. And this is now my 7th session, as you said. This has come up on multiple occasions. And so I've had lots of conversations about this bill, from trying to look at it from every direction, but at this point, I'm not supportive.
Let's hear briefly from 2 others who were for and against this idea. Lisa Calderon, briefly, why do you support it?
I support it. Well, I'm the only mayoral candidate who co-created my housing homelessness platform with actual unhoused folks. They also recommended social housing and also safe injection sites, which I would like us to talk about as overdose prevention sites. I support it because, again, I haven't just talked to people, I have actually done the work, including people who have struggled with addictions. We have to implement evidence-based harm reduction models that have been proven to work. And continuing to punish people, criminalize people, does not work. There's plenty of data about that. Also, yes, it would be nice.
I'm just going to leave it there so we can touch on a couple other things. Thank you, though. Kelly Brough, why do you oppose supervised drug injection sites?
It's definitely for personal reasons. By the way, I've had the chance and spent some time touring at the Harm Reduction Center in Denver and trying to understand the benefit. I think, like everyone, I was hoping there'd be large percentages of people who transition into treatment. It was much smaller than I expected. That said, I spent my entire life loving someone who struggled with an addiction. And I know how hard it is to figure out how you love and support someone but not enable a behavior that's destroying them and your family. And I think for me, I struggle with the enabling piece and trying to draw that line. And I think it's a fair conversation for a community to have, not to fight about it, but to recognize this is really hard.
Thank you. We're going to talk about crime and public safety in Denver. And again, every candidate will have an opportunity to talk about this issue. Some questions to kind of set the table for folks. Denver police have an authorized strength of up to 1,600 officers or so. Department is short of that number right now and looking to hire to get up to 1,600. Please raise your hand if you would like to increase the number of DPD officers beyond the 1,600, the authorized strength. Would anybody enlarge DPD beyond that? Mike Johnston, Trinidad Rodriguez, Debbie Ortega, Kwame Spearman.
And just to be clear, you're saying an increase from
an increase beyond where they're authorized, which would be a jump up from where they are currently.
Yes.
Next question. Denver STAR program, which sends mental health professionals to some police calls, has been widely praised. Please raise your hand if you would like to expand the work of the STAR program to answer more calls. That is everybody.
And proactive.
Denver spends approximately 20% of its budget on police. Please raise your hand if you would decrease the Denver police budget and spend some of that money elsewhere.
It depends. The audits need to happen.
Open to it based on what audits show. Okay. The Denver School Board ultimately makes the final decision about how to handle school safety. But please raise your hand if you think that DPS should bring back Denver police officers as school resource officers. Kwame Spearman, Chris Hansen, Mike Johnston, Trinidad Rodriguez, Debbie Ortega, Kelly Brough.
I think schools should have the choice.
Schools should have the choice. Individual schools?
Individual schools.
Individual schools. And same from Kelly Brough on that. Individual schools decide if they want DPD as their SROs. The mayor of Denver obviously wields a lot of influence in state politics, so I'm going to ask you about a couple ideas before the state legislature. Congrats to the two of you who are state legislators. Please raise your hand if you think that the state of Colorado should have some kind of ban on so-called assault weapons. That's everyone. Please raise your hand if you support expanding who can apply for a red flag order to seize guns from someone if a judge deems them to be dangerous. Expand red flag.
And enforce.
Expand red flag and enforce is what Leslie Harrod says. All right, so I believe that that's everyone except for Aurelio Martinez. Please raise your hand if you support the current legislation to make all auto theft a felony and not just the theft of cars worth more than $2,000. I'll give you a second to think. Yep. Please raise your hand if you support the current legislation to make all auto theft a felony and not just theft of cars worth more than $2,000. In opposition to that legislation, I believe I saw Lisa Calderon, Aurelio Martinez, and Terrance Roberts. Please raise your hand if you support last year's change in the law to once again make the possession of 1 to 4 grams of fentanyl a felony. Do you support that change in state law?
Can you say it again?
Absolutely. Do you support the change in the law to make possession a felony again, knowing possession of fentanyl? The change that was made last year. Do you support that? I see no support from Calderon, Lisa Calderon, Jim Walsh, Ian Tafoya, Leslie Harrod, Terrance Roberts.
And can I clarify that, since I voted on that bill?
Yeah, well, actually, you're going to be asked a question about why you've been on both sides of that, so
okay.
Just hold on real quick.
That's fair.
Okay.
Well, data shows that youth violence is going up across the state. This week, a 16-year-old was shot and critically injured outside Denver's East High School. 2 other DPS students are suspects in that shooting. This question is for Terrance Roberts. You often share your life story, how when you were young, you were involved with gangs, went to prison, and then you dedicated years of your life to keeping kids away from violence. So what should the city be doing right now that it's not doing?
I mean, I think we need more after-school programs. We need more dedicated youth spaces. So if your kid goes to the Carla Madison Center, it's full of hundreds of adults. We have a Boys and Girls Club in the Holly. We have one in Montbello. We need more dedicated youth spaces. It is up to these killers who are doing the killing, and that doesn't just mean it's gang members. Whoever it is, they have to make the decision. And poverty is the biggest precursor to violence. The biggest precursor, and I said this in my opening statement, to poverty is housing costs, it's fuel costs, it's food costs. The biggest precursor for children joining negative peer groups is domestic violence, which stems from housing and poverty. So if we addressed our cycle of poverty in the city of Denver, we have a lot of poor people in this city who live in historical communities, especially black and brown communities in Denver. A lot of our kids are going to school angry, they're going to school hungry, and they have nothing to do after school, but yet we have activities for adults to do after they get off of work, like go drink a beer or go smoke weed. I'm for the beer industry, I'm for the marijuana industry, but we need to focus on our children.
Just real quickly, though, part of your plan talks about providing free child care. How do you plan on standing that up and funding it?
I mean, just same way we're going to focus on housing. A lot of our issues stem with our housing. If we bring more sales tax into our city, installing a public banking system, making Denver a 24-hour city, bringing more trade shows to Denver, we need to make Denver a world-class city. We need to stop focusing on just affordable housing, which everybody until today was focused on, and we need to start making sure that we start using our public safety dollars to address things like child care and youth violence, because that is our #1 precursor to violence is poverty, and it's children who are mainly doing these acts of violence.
Thank you. Kwame Spearman, you staked out one of the tougher law and order stances in the race. You have called for Denver to institute harsher criminal punishments than what currently exists in state law, which is something that Republican leaders in Aurora are trying to do right now. You've said that you're open to bringing back qualified immunity protections for police officers who violate citizens' civil rights. That was an effort that Leslie Herod led at the state capitol. You've suggested that the other candidates in the race don't understand the issue of crime and don't understand public safety. What is it that they don't get?
I am a small business owner, and every day I've got to ensure that both we get customers in and that our employees are safe. And I think what I'm feeling is what Denverites are feeling right now, Kyle. We've got to have a city that has safe neighborhoods. And the incident that you talked about at East wasn't just outside of East High School, it's also outside of Tattered Cover. We've got to start enforcing our laws. We are not right now. If you have had an incident which you've had to call 911, the cops are too infrequently showing up. And when they do, they don't feel empowered to actually do their job. So yes, we've got to do all of the things to get our police active. We've got to question the judges that we've got in our city right now and how they're responding. We've got to question why our police officers are not feeling compelled to do things. And yes, some of the legislation that has been passed in 2019, in 2020, and 2021 is a part of that. And if you feel that our city is getting unsafe, that's why. And so, thank you.
Thank you. You know what? Let's do another show of hands here. You guys have been real responsive on that. Is anybody else interested in joining Kwame Spearman on this idea of talking about bringing back qualified immunity for police officers who violate citizens' civil rights? Please raise your hand if you would join Kwame in talking about that idea.
Can we talk about?
Well, and to be clear, Kyle, what I was quoted as saying is right now
You were quoted. I heard you say it. So what's your specific, are you interested in the idea of returning qualified immunity for police officers or no?
My understanding is for decades how the personal liability risk works is for a public official. If you knowingly violate the law, then you're personally at risk and your assets are personally at risk. That was true for police officers. So I'm just checking in on the qualified immunity. I do support going back to that because when a city settles a claim today, that officer can be personally liable, but sometimes cities settle claims with no admission of fault. Sometimes you settle claims because the city maybe had a bad policy, the officer was just following it. I don't think our officers should be at risk, and I think this is hurting our ability to recruit officers today.
All right, so Kelly Brough and Kwame Spearman on that. Under 30 seconds for Leslie Herod. You brought that bill through the state legislature, got a bunch of Republicans to vote for it following George Floyd's murder.
Yeah.
30 seconds.
And after what happened in Memphis, I heard from those state legislators, Republicans specifically, that helped us to pass that bill. Terrance Roberts was at the table as well. So was Denise Maez, who's out in the audience today. And they said, we're glad we did that in Colorado. Our people, we deserve to be safe in our cities. We shouldn't have law enforcement that feels like they can violate someone's constitutional rights. Now, I know that's not most folks, because my dad's a law enforcement officer. My dad had that badge, and he did not violate anyone's rights. He started as a groundskeeper and worked his way up to the head of internal investigations.
Thank you.
Ending qualified immunity is the right thing to do. We should expect more from our officers, and quite frankly, many of them are stepping up.
Thank you.
Debbie Ortega, as a long-term member of City Council, you've had more direct control over the city's decisions than anyone else here. Are you and your City Council colleagues at all responsible for the state of crime and public safety right now in Denver?
So as you know, Denver is a strong mayor form of government. I have raised issues as a council member. Oftentimes, if you don't have 7 votes to get the mayor to agree and something passes, and we have passed legislation that has been repealed by the mayor or vetoed. The tobacco law, for example, was an example where that occurred. So I think Clearly, City Council has a different role and responsibility than the administration. And I have worked really hard to address many of these issues that we're talking about here. And sometimes I haven't been successful. I've got a bill coming to committee next week on addressing railroad safety. And we're working to make sure we've got the votes to pass it so we don't have a catastrophic event in the city of Denver like just existed in East Palestine, Ohio. I want to make sure we're doing everything we can to protect our city. I'll continue to do that as the mayor of Denver.
Mike Johnston, you raised your hand to hire more police officers. Conveniently, I checked with DPD this week, and there are 148 openings with 70 recruits in the academy. Why do you think you'll be better at hiring officers than the current mayor, and do you plan to lower the basic minimum education and character requirements to fill the jobs?
Yeah, I think the key is I've come out and say what we need are actually 200 more first responders. And the key is because there are different people you need to respond to different kinds of situations. That means you need more mental health staffers when you have someone that's in a mental health crisis. It means you need more paramedics or EMTs when someone is in a potential overdose situation or physical health crisis. And then there are places where, yes, if there are acts of violence or there are property crimes, you do need officers. So the key here is having the right public servant to respond to the right crisis. So I think you got to fully staff up that need, and then you have to be able to deploy people for the situations that have the greatest alignment. But the reason why we can recruit more is we do want to recruit them to a different kind of job than they've done so far. When I talk to people in communities, what they want are officers back who are visible, who are walking the streets, who are talking to community members, who are walking into businesses, giving them their cards, talking to neighbors, asking questions. They want real community-based policing where you can reform what currently feels like being policed and put back in what feels like being protected. You can do that with a combination of both mental health support, EMTs and PAs as well as officers.
I just want to answer now on the last part. Will you be changing the minimum basic requirements to fill these jobs to get more candidates?
No, I don't think you need to change the minimum requirements. I think you have to recruit a different kind of person to do a different kind of work, which is this is really meant to be serving and protecting. A lot of people want to serve their communities. They want to have a chance to actually be a part of that community and be a part of that fabric to do it.
Thank you.
Lisa Calderon, do you think that more Denver police officers on the street would make people safer? And if not, what would make people safer?
No, I do not, and I'm speaking as someone with a law degree and a doctorate in education. It's a myth that more police on the street reduces crimes. In fact, it can increase crimes for communities of color who feel targeted. We are just 2 years from the murder of George Floyd, and we actually have more police killings now than we did before he was killed. We just had the case of Tyree Nichols, and we have to look at the entire institution of policing. First responders who are paramedics are not the same as police officers. That is a special designation with special responsibilities. And so we need to really we're past reform, actually. We're past training. I've been on use of force committees. I've trained law enforcement for 20 years. We have to have new leadership. It's interesting that we keep talking about hiring more police officers, and we don't talk about hiring more social workers or librarians or people with expertise in intervention in violence. The police lobby is very powerful, and we need to have other city workers also that we value also have those kinds of powers and respect, and to unionize other city workers.
Thank you. Chris Hansen, your new campaign ad focuses on your plan to crack down on homeless encampments and crime. The ad opens with images of 7 people of color who appear homeless and committing crimes. Can you tell us about that choice you made?
Yeah, I felt like we really needed to highlight the #1 issue on Denver voters' minds, which is people not feeling safe on the street and needing to step it up when it comes to public safety. I'm so glad we get to talk about recruitment because, we have 1,600 officers. We're way short in the police department. We're even worse on the sheriff's side. I am the only candidate up here who's been endorsed by rank and file law enforcement officers, enjoying the endorsement from the sheriffs that are part of the Teamsters Union. And I got that endorsement because what I communicated to them was I am ready on day 1 as the next mayor to reinvest and reinvigorate those departments. Our sheriff's department right now for frontline officers is down 40% headcount. 40%. Our jail is in a crisis situation, forced overtime, leading to more people leaving the department, leading to more forced overtime. We have serious work to do to improve public safety, and I'm so proud to get their endorsement in this race because I think I am the candidate who can address this crisis that we're in.
Ian Tafoya, I watched you have a physical reaction to Chris Hansen's defense of the ad featuring people of color committing crimes and experiencing homelessness.
I gotta be real honest about this. Raise your hand here on the stage if you're disgusted by an ad that makes people of color as the only criminals or the people who are overrepresented in homelessness. It is a trope that has been broken forever. There's a reason why people have PhDs in this writing books about it. I cannot believe that he would make this ad. I am so disappointed in you. We've worked on things together. When I saw that ad, I called a lot of people, and guess what? They agree with us. I hope that you will denounce it and take it away.
Thank you, Ian.
Chris Hansen.
Look, I think that's fine. I took actual footage from around town. It is not just people of color that are featured in this ad. I think this is really kind of shocking that it suddenly becomes this conversation about the way that we took footage. This is the #1 issue on voters' minds. How do we improve public safety? How do we address the homelessness crisis? To have some accusation that somehow a racist ad, I think, is totally overwrought. That doesn't make any sense.
Leslie Aird.
I gotta agree with Ian here. And as a woman of color, as a black woman, it's really interesting to me to have someone on the stage ignore the fact that people of color are asking you to take that ad down. It is offensive and it's scary for our communities. But I want to be clear. You didn't see what we saw because you're not us.
Yep.
But you've got to put those blinders away. You've got to have more people looking at your ads and in your administration that look like the communities you're serving. It was offensive, Chris, and as a friend of mine, I'm disappointed too.
Kwame Spearman, last thought on this before we move on.
I just want to say, I think there's actually something Lisa and I can agree on. There are more white people who are homeless on the streets of Denver right now than there are people of color. And so, Chris, you know I love you, but I couldn't agree more with Ian. If you want to use your engineering degree, you got to have statistics. And statistics are showing something that was not represented on that video.
Kwame Spearman, thank you.
Leslie Aird, we'll go back to the fentanyl legislation. You have talked about how criminalizing addiction is a failed policy, but then you voted for the new fentanyl law that makes it a felony to knowingly possess 1 to 4 grams of a drug with fentanyl in it.
Yeah.
In 30 seconds, can you explain that discrepancy?
Absolutely. The war on drugs is a failed policy. That's why I brought the bill to defelonize simple possession for folks who are addicted. You know, that is why we brought that bill forward in a bipartisan way. That's why it was supported across the board and passed the legislature. But this fentanyl bill that we brought this past year, I did support it because we were going back to felonization, going from 0, and we were able to bring that up to 1. However, as I'm looking at the statistics today, and I watched today and yesterday as Department of Corrections asked for more beds to fill with folks who are addicted without having enough providers to provide mental health services to those people, we were wrong. We didn't get it right.
Thank you. Jim Walsh, how would you re-envision what Denver police do? How many officers? What would they do? What wouldn't they do?
I don't think more cops is a solution. I'm very uncomfortable with this notion of hysteria that there's a crime wave. I think historically, what's happened when we have that is that remilitarization of police and also the targeting of low-income communities. And that's what we're seeing more of today. The real danger we face of violence, friends, in our society is from white nationalist groups. That's the danger of violence that we face today. And that's where I think law enforcement needs to focus itself. And I want to take just a quick minute of my time to mention that we are so far behind in the movement toward harm reduction in this country compared to European countries and other nations such as Canada. Safe use space, if you go into the Harm Reduction Center today, you will see a wall of remembrance. Dozens of photos of people who have died from overdoses. If we had a safe use space, there would not be nearly as many photos on that wall. And so we have to move to harm reduction because it destigmatizes and humanizes people who face addiction.
Thank you.
Thomas Wolfe, your campaign is almost solely focused on ending encampments. I'm curious how that translates to strategies of policing. Would you seek more enforcement of low-level offenses similar to New York City's broken windows and stop and frisk approaches, which are more broadly categorized as zero-tolerance enforcement?
Yeah, so I'd back up on a couple of things. One was the immunity issue, which, of course, we can't have individual officers on the hook for the liability that we create because we're not going to be able to attract any more officers. The way to solve that is to have that come out of the budget of safety overall so that they police themselves. The second one we hear about is, you've heard this from City Council, you've heard this from our mayor, that we can't afford a cadet class. Our police officers is effectively a seniority system. You make more money each year. So if you're not bringing in that lowest cost part of your force, you can't not afford to do that. So that's ridiculous. Your question was specific to when I confront them. What was the?
Yeah, it's talking about your strategies of policing. Would you be looking for more enforcement of low-level offenses similar to what's happening?
I'm speaking specifically to the encampments. When you show up, and I can go through a laundry list of trespass, vagrancy, possession, theft, public defecation, public intoxication, you name it, we're going to enforce those laws.
Thank you.
I just want to clarify something. The cadets are not officers that are on the streets. They have to go through the actual application process to become an officially certified officer. So they're going to college while they're in the program, and then they have to apply to become an officer or a sheriff or a paramedic, depending what their choice is. But we can't put them on the streets in a car doing the work that a police officer does.
Thank you.
Aurelio Martinez, I've heard you talk about more youth programming to address crime. John Hickenlooper, when he was mayor, gave kids and teens free access to Denver rec centers. That still exists today. So how does additional youth programming reduce crime and offer something Denver doesn't already have?
There's a difference between free access to youth facilities like recreation centers than there is to having an actual youth programs. Competitive team programs such as basketball, baseball, we've had that back in the days, earlier days, and there wasn't as much youth crime because they had something to do. They can be in a competitive sport that's from a recreation center and compete against each other. We used to do swimming meets from all the swimming pools in Denver. We used to have team competition. This is what's going to have to happen again to keep the youth out of the parks doing nothing except smoking legalized marijuana, okay? That is one of the key reasons why I was endorsed by Coach D, Ededra Dangerfield, and Coach Rudy Carey, two icons that deal with youth, deals with recreation. That has to come back, not just open up the centers, because then they come in, you give them a basketball, here, play. Doesn't work.
Thank you. Kelly Brough, your community safety plan includes a lot of the things that Mayor Hancock's administration has already been doing while crime has increased. Are you proposing any drastic changes in the way that public safety is handled in Denver?
Yeah, I'm proposing a few things. One is not only just increase STAR, but we want to get closer to that 12% of our call volume at 911 to be able to respond to those non-emergency, freeing or to mental health crisis and addiction issues, freeing our officers to respond to critical issues. Second is making our department more transparent. I think it has two benefits. By sharing more of what our officers do, I actually do think people get a better view and understanding of the full role of what it means to be a police officer. And I think what people will discover is our officers do a good job a lot of the time. And I think that will help us build trust, but I think it will also attract more people who want to be in that service role. And then the third thing is fundamentally, we talk about crime and public safety as only a response issue. I think we have to start to treat it much more like the rec center example you gave, where every single member of the team is thinking about what's their role and responsibility to reduce crime and the drivers of crime. So economic development, a great education for our kids, access not just to our rec centers, but real opportunity for our kids. They can see a future, stable housing. These are the things that we know reduce crime in the long run.
So in fairness, I asked you how you would make a drastic departure from what the Hancock administration is doing right now, and you said expand STAR, which was a universal agreement across the stage. You said better PR for police officers, and then this idea of more people paying attention. That doesn't sound like a drastic departure at all.
I don't think I said PR, Kyle, at all.
You said you want people to better understand what police do so that they would be happier with it.
I think we become more transparent. So you actually see what we're doing every single day. And it allows our department to start to address the culture
of improvement that says we recognize we have to improve. We invite our community to look for that improvement, but it also allows us to really show what officers do, not just in a crisis or when things go wrong, but what we do every single day. And I do think that is vastly different. Today, departments around the nation kind of hunker down. They don't share, and we're not as transparent, and that is a significant change.
Thank you.
Trinidad Rodriguez, we haven't heard from you since the yes-no section, raising your hands. You also raised your hand about hiring more police officers.
Targeted in 2 comments. I would like to talk about those.
Well, now will be your chance, but first let me ask the direct question. Denver Police budget, as part of this year's budget, is $308 million. That's 19% of city spending. How much more money are you going to ask for from council, and what are you cutting to get it?
$150 million more. Our police force is the size it was in 1997, yet our city has grown by 50%. Those numbers just don't work for keeping people safe. And the answer, as a numbers guy, I love the question about how do you work the budget. The answer is we will make cuts. We'll make cuts to several specific line items. But the key thing to remember when you're thinking of these cuts is when our business comes roaring back, the tax revenue and the increase in taxable base will come with it, and we will restore all of those reductions that we implement temporarily. And the answer is we will reduce street sweeping or street plowing for Chris Hansen, and we will reduce gasoline costs because we will shift to electric.
So fewer roads getting plowed, more officers with that money.
Yes.
Thank you.
And if I could respond to those couple questions that were raised, you know, I think we've heard 2 people talk about mental health being a bad thing, mental health disorders being a bad thing. One person called it insanity on this of our peers, and I don't agree with that. I think a clinically diagnosed mental health disorder is something to be treated. That is not that's not blaming someone. That's just a reality. And then the second comment that was about the field treatment hospital. We can provide high-quality field treatment hospitals that are like Betty Ford, and that's exactly my vision.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think you're raising your hand for snowplows, and you know I love to talk about that, but we're not going to do it here and now. We've got 2 more debates coming up in this race. We still need to talk about affordable housing. We're not doing snowplows tonight. I'm sorry. So Mayor Hancock leaves office as the most unpopular Denver mayor in recent history, if you believe the polling. Please raise your hand if you supported Mayor Michael Hancock's reelection in 2019. Up high. Please raise your hand if you believe the city of Denver requires a significant change in direction from the current administration. I want to ask you about taxation. Please raise your hand if you believe that Denver can meet its current needs with its current level of taxation. Please raise your hand if you do not see the need for additional tax increases. Okay, do not see the need for additional tax increases. So the folks who are dissenting from that are Lisa Calderon, Aurelio Martinez, Jim Walsh, Leslie Herod with a hand wave, with a maybe there. Okay.
I think I misunderstood the question.
The question was, does Denver need to raise taxes to meet its needs, or can we just move the money around? Do you believe that it does need to raise taxes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Wait.
She answered a different question than what I asked. We're going to plow on and hope that everybody understood. The state legislature is considering lifting the ban on local rent control. Please raise your hand if you think Denver should consider some form of rent control. So those in favor of some form of rent control, Lisa Calderon, Jim Walsh, Aurelio Martinez, Ian Tafoya, Debbie Ortega, Terrance Roberts, and a middling hand from Leslie Herod, who's going to vote on this in a little bit, so we'll watch.
Can I clarify this?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Okay. Denver currently has what I consider our form of rent control. We were not allowed to do what we're doing now until the legislature gave part of that control back to local government.
You can do it on a very limited level, but not in the broader scale that the state legislature
And that's what I support, is what we have in place today through our expanding housing affordability. We did have an inclusionary housing ordinance, which was basically...
I'm hearing you say you support the rent control we have now.
I do.
But not an addition.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll just add, since I was the middle of the road, that I do believe that rent control, some rent control policies need to be part of a comprehensive solution to ensure that people can afford to live in this city. Everything has to be on the table right now. Affordability is the #1 crisis in Denver right now. People can't afford to live here. We've got to put every option on the table.
30 seconds. Chris Hansen, does rent control work?
Kyle, it's never worked. In the history of the world, it's never worked. Every time you put in rent control, investment in new housing goes to zero. Just ask our folks in New York City and San Francisco that have had huge problems with this policy. It's a mistake for Denver, I think, to go in this direction. If we want to accelerate housing opportunity in the city, let's use the incredible new allocation from the state and feds to get it done.
Thank you, Chris Hansen. 30 seconds, Lisa Calderon. Same question. Does rent control work?
Yes, and we need to look at it as an array of options. So it's not rent control in a vacuum. We also need to look at eviction defense and fund that. We need to look at just cause eviction. We need to look at higher wages. All of that will help people to stay in their homes. We also need to look at when people are being evicted or foreclosed on, intervention. So it needs to all happen together.
Thank you.
I think you're missing the point that some people are renters. Who's a renter here? I'm a renter here. If you're a renter here and you're worried about their landlord jacking it up $600 in 1 month, then yes, absolutely you want rent stabilization and a form of rent control. If you're in your house and you're worried about property tax, we have solutions for you. But what about people who are so concerned about whether they can stay in the city they love or they just moved to?
But there's a better way to solve it.
Mike Johnson, briefly. Leslie Harrod, we heard from you on this. Mike Johnson, briefly.
There's a better way to solve this. We can control rents and have prices not go up without having to have rent control, which stops new development. That's what we did in Proposition 123. What this does now is allows us to build new affordable units. And those affordable units, you never have to pay more than 30% of what your income is. So if you're a first-year teacher making $40,000 a year, that's $1,000 a month you'd pay in rent. And that deed-restricted unit means your rent can never go up unless your income goes up. But those units are supported.
Hold on a second. There's 13 people, so there's physically no way that we can listen to you all at once.
Okay. Those units are supported and developed by financing that allows them to stay affordable without us having to pass on higher rents to other renters in the same neighborhood.
15 seconds from Lisa Calderon. It looked like you disagreed.
Yeah, what if you can't get in one of those units? We're not talking about just certain people in certain units. We're talking about across Denver, where about half of folks are renters. So we need a broad solution and not just a few thousand here and a few thousand there.
15 seconds from Thomas Wolf.
Being a capital markets professional, if we're trying to solve a supply issue where the capital is looking, if you're going to rent control increases the risk and decreases the reward, that capital will go somewhere else. Just full stop.
Mike Johnston, let's talk a little bit in a different direction of affordability. Your plan calls for housing density. Look around the skyline right now. Housing density means vertical housing, vertical density, and luxury vertical housing. So first I'd like to know, is there a neighborhood in Denver where density has resulted in more affordability?
In most places that I've seen, no. And that's the problem, which is we are building a bunch more units, but we're building a bunch more luxury units that are not affordable to people. And so what I would do is build 25,000 units that are affordable, and they're permanently affordable. That means you can't make them affordable for 10 years, and a new owner comes on, buys the building, and jacks up the rents again. These units would be deed restricted to be affordable forever. And that means if you're making 40,000, 50,000, 60,000, 80,000, you got people in this city that are 2 teachers married that are making $85,000 a year and can't afford to live here. So you can do that if you focus on actually building the units that we know will be affordable and keep them affordable. You can also then help folks get from renting to home ownership by making sure they can get down payment assistance to be able to get into homes. That's what I did when we built the Deerfield Fund to help black families and African-American families get access to down payments to get into home ownership. We can expand that to all first-generation, first-time home buyers. People get from renting all the way to owning.
Just a short answer follow-up here. Which neighborhoods now should be expecting this influx of residents in these houses that you're describing?
Oh, we should be building affordable housing in every neighborhood in the city, and it should not be that you only concentrate affordable housing in certain neighborhoods. That's a part of the entire city's obligation, and it should be shared.
So a question to Kwame Spearman on this. You've billed your campaign as the neighborhood mayor. You want to kind of decentralize some government down to I just said it louder. You want an increased focus on neighborhood needs, okay? So what happens if you're the neighborhood mayor and a neighbor decides to opt out of affordable housing or decides to opt out of density because everybody loves it in somebody else's neighborhood?
Correct. And Marshall, I thought that was a great question. Mike, I'm not totally sure where you're going to build all of these units. And I think that's a question that the city needs to ask for. The reason why I'm the neighborhood mayor is there are neighborhoods that are not fit for density. I grew up, Hilltop, for example, where you've got Park Hill, where you live, Kyle. Like, East Denver in general is not, from a transit perspective, going to handle density well. There are other neighborhoods in which people are currently being gentrified out of those neighborhoods. You've got to get density. One area that, Ian, I totally agree with you on, is the rent is too high in Capitol Hill. That is where our workforce class used to work, or excuse me, used to live. If we have greater density there, that will give us the supply and demand that we need that keep rental prices low. There's this weird division here that we can't have distinct neighborhoods that have distinct traits. For me, I grew up at 6th and Monaco, and my parents are going to be able to hopefully leave my sister and I a piece of real estate that is appreciated greatly. That is the American dream. And then there are other parts of the city that we're seeing that people are losing their ability to live in their homes. We've got to give solutions to there. That's where those micro units need to be.
I want to clarify something real quick before we move on. Under this neighborhood mayor system, who decides which neighborhoods get to opt out of affordable housing and density? Is it the neighborhood organization or is it the mayor?
It's the mayor, of course.
Okay.
Can I clarify something?
Debbie Ortega, the next question is for you.
Deed-restricted properties require access to the Colorado Housing Finance Authority tax credits. That's what buys down the cost. It's a very competitive process. Applications that are wanting to build affordable housing usually have to go through that process at least 3 or 4 cycles before being able to get their funding. So that is a challenge, and we absolutely need varying price points of housing that used to exist in our city. They don't exist today. And I think we need to be looking at different models of housing, like SRO housing, single room occupancy, very similar to the Barth Hotel or the YMCA downtown, because for some people, that communal living is very important. When people get into housing, sometimes they're very isolated. And this is more specific on the homeless side, but we need that varying price point of housing because we have this whole missing middle section that we're not really focusing on and talking about. And I believe we can do a lot of that with manufactured housing as well.
In 30 seconds, can you talk about your housing plan where you want to change the permitting process to make it easier to be able to build affordable housing? What exactly are you trying to change?
So first of all, I want to bring our workers back. I want the city open for business. Second of all, I want to make sure that we are looking at whether or not our permit office is in the right location. It used to be part of our building department, which is now known as the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, and it's now in our planning department. I've talked to a lot of contractors, even to some employees who have, they're concerned that we're not moving the process through. I don't think it's just a staffing issue. I think it's where it's at and how we're looking at that to make sure we're meeting the needs.
Thank you.
Can I respond to that? Just because she misrepresented the program that I launched.
I'm going to move on. We haven't heard Trinidad Rodriguez. I'd like to get him involved here. Okay. You were part of the group that updated Blueprint Denver. That's the roadmap for Denver's growth through 2040. Yes. Blueprint Denver lists Globeville and Elyria-Swansea as areas that are most vulnerable to involuntary displacement. This area has endured years of I-70 construction and the environmental impacts of Suncor. Next, development. Mm-hmm. What can be done to protect the interests of this heavily Latino area?
The one thing that I think the Globeville, Elyria-Swansea community has called for is more control of their future. And that's frankly what every Denverite should have. The ability to stay here as long as they want, to have kids who start families here, who start careers here. And the way to do that is through my affordability plan, and this will work for Globeville, Elyria-Swansea. My view on affordability is it's an equation. It is income minus expenses, household expenses. And not enough people here are talking about income. And the thing that we can do the first step for boosting income is creating a structural relationship between the city and county of Denver and Denver Public Schools to drive student outcomes way better where they are presently totally failing. And then on the expense side, accelerating the development of townhomes, low medium density, that does respect the existing character of the neighborhood.
But part of the plan to help the residents stay residents of that area is that they need to get better income?
Yeah, everybody should be able to have better income. We should, by investing in people's knowledge and skills, because that ultimately is the thing that allows people to weather the ups and downs of the economy. With all due respect to folks who are in favor of minimum wage, that is the worst way to prop up people's income because it has a risk associated with driving jobs away to other cities and counties across lines. And, you know, a job that's lost times the minimum wage is zero. That's the income from that job. So investing in people's skills and knowledge so that they have the ability to earn and control their own futures is exactly the way to do that.
Thank you. So just to clarify, you would seek no minimum wage or just not Denver's recent increase in the minimum wage?
I would not seek an additional minimum wage.
Thank you. We are not going to have an extensive discussion tonight about the Park Hill Golf Course redevelopment because you've had that everywhere and you will continue to have that everywhere. But it seems like at the crux of that is not so much people fighting for development versus a golf course, because I haven't heard anybody advocate for the golf course. It seems like the question in there is the city extracting enough from the developers involved that it's a good deal? Question for you, Lisa Calderon. You're welcome to talk about Park Hill Golf Course in West Side if you want, but more generally, should Denver be demanding more of developers? And at what point does the city demand so much of developers that they risk alienating them, they take the work someplace else?
Well, we shouldn't be just handing them the keys to the city, and that's what's been happening over the past 12 years. You know, this is about false choices between open space and development. We shouldn't be having a for-profit corporate developer deciding our housing plan in Denver. And so there's so many things that we could be doing. And no one's advocating for it to stay a golf course. What we need is to actually look at a full inventory of our city spaces, green and gray spaces, and turn those into housing. We need to demand more of our affordable housing developers. And for the Globeville, Elyria, Swansea folks who did not want a sports arena, you know, listen to them and actually give them social housing, and actually also have a social housing development authority that community residents sit on.
Thank you. Aurelio Martinez, you said you want neighborhood organizations to have more input about development. Neighborhood organizations, and frankly anyone, can go give their input to council right now, which makes the decisions. So do you seek to take power away from city council, giving the okay for zoning and development?
Not at all. But one thing is they don't listen to the neighborhood anyhow. So they just waste their time being in city council till midnight when the decision has been made. I'm glad you asked that because I want to disagree with the statement that was said up there, with the statement that was said that the administration should decide where the developments goes. That's totally wrong. The neighborhood should decide what happens in their neighborhoods and any development near their neighborhoods that affects the neighborhoods. They have to be there. That is instilled in Blueprint Denver, where any developers, any development that's going to go on has to adhere to the neighborhood plan. And so far, this administration has gone against that every time. They ignore the neighborhood plan. I am saying we need to give more control to the neighborhoods, and that has to be. It has to be. It's my priority.
And what happens when every neighborhood says, not in my backyard?
Then it's not in their backyard. There's plenty of land in Denver that's zoned for high density, that's zoned for developments that can do what they want to do, but they want to do it next to a neighborhood simply because they can buy the land cheaper and make more money on the bottom line, and that's not going to happen. They can move. The city can give developers incentives, and they can give them things to make their bottom dollar be profitable by building them developments where they're zoned to be. Zoning is there for protection, and we have to keep that.
Thank you.
Thomas Wolf, hold that thought. The next question is for you from Manusha Roy, and you can work in whatever you want to say.
Okay.
On the issue of cost of living, you've said that you want to subsidize health care for Denver's childcare workers and creative artists, among others, if and only if Denver solves homelessness and has the money to spare. Is that pitting one group in need against another?
Well, to be specific, it's the folks in the encampments, which is a subset of homelessness. I think we have to be very specific about who we're talking about, as well as when we talk about shelter versus housing. So I'd pump the brakes on giving these folks housing, but we absolutely have to get them sheltered. Currently, this indigent population gets their health care from Denver Health in the emergency room at retail pricing, probably in the whole about $2,500 from the ambulance ride to Denver Health. Denver, out of our benevolence, journals over around $30 million to Denver Health. So I'm a financial professional. In my certification, I had to be able to calculate expected losses, which is how you underwrite insurance. If you give me $30 million of expected loss, I can cover a lot more than that 2,000 population. To the extent that I could use the balance of that, let's use that for people that are NGOs. There's a terrific number of 10-member staffs that have to go out and shop for health insurance. Let's use that budget for them, our creative class, daycare workers, all of those folks.
Jim Walsh, you've called for a universal basic income in Denver. Who would qualify? How in the world do you pay for that?
It would pay for itself in what would be saved by the city through incarceration, through substance use. It would pay for itself. There's universal basic income programs that have been used experimentally all over the country, and Denver is using one currently. The data seems very clear that the people that know best how to use more resources are the people who need them. And so I think the whole conversation around housing is important, and many of the ideas I'm hearing here today are great ideas. But for me, the central question here is the massive disparity of wealth we have in our society. That the average CEO salary used to be around 30 times the average worker. It's now over 300. The minimum wage, if it had kept pace with inflation since the 60s, today would be well into the 20s. If it had kept pace with CEO salaries, it would be in the 60s. And so what we really need to be addressing is helping people with resources, and that includes a higher minimum wage, that includes universal basic income, and it includes support for union density in this city.
And Denver
workers first.
And just to clarify, obviously the word universal has a dictionary definition, but you mentioned Denver has a pilot program for people experiencing homelessness. When you talk about UBI, you truly do mean everyone. I
don't mean everyone. I mean it would certainly be centered on the most needy in our society.
You know where that cutoff would be?
You know, that would have to come over many, many conversations, where that cutoff would be. But I think we have to confront the idea that people who face poverty are to blame for their economic situation. We have to confront that idea directly. And I think another thing that needs to be part of this conversation too, friends, is helping workers organize. Workers all over this country, in Starbucks, in Amazon, are desperately trying to organize. And they're doing this because workers today do not have a fair deal. They do not have a fair deal. The office of the mayor ought to be an ally in that movement, and I intend to be that mayor.
So I have two yes-no questions for you on that idea of unionization. You want more city workers unionized. Does that include sanitation workers?
Yes.
Would you allow them to strike?
Yes.
Because that gets city's attention in a hurry.
Yes. 1968 Memphis.
Okay, thank you.
Terrance Roberts, you've previously said that there are too many housing units sitting empty in Denver that could be used for affordable housing. That's a program the city already has right now. So what, as mayor, would you be doing to scale up that program to reach more people?
I mean, and I've said this a couple times already, the conversation of affordable housing, which is what a lot of our candidates are pushing. Affordable housing is owned by developers. Nobody is moving from Colfax and Broadway into an affordable housing unit without that middle ground of housing, which will be public housing, and then they can get the help they need for substance abuse, for mental health, domestic violence, or whatever, and then they can move into affordable housing. We have over 20,000 units in the metro area empty because nobody is transitioning from chronic homelessness into affordable housing. People cannot even afford affordable housing, so we need to get people into those units before we keep this heavy emphasis on these huge structures that are going up to just keep developers busy. Affordable housing is owned by developers. Public/social housing is owned by everyone in this room if you're a Denver resident and you are a taxpayer. And that's what we'll do.
Chris Hansen, when we talk about affordability, it's usually housing, like we've been talking about right now. But right now, affordability is also our Excel and utility bills in Denver Excel. You say you will negotiate directly with Excel to protect Denver residents from excessive gas and electric bills. But it's the state and the Public Utilities Commission that approve and set those rates. So what do you mean that you will negotiate directly with Excel?
Well, I want to make sure Denver voters know that the next mayor is going to be doing the next franchise agreement with Excel. And I'm in discussions with them right now about mistakes that have been made in the last few years that led to higher bills. First of all, we didn't have natural gas price protection in place. It's called hedging. Very low amount of that was in place. That was a mistake. The second thing that happened is the storm costs from the Winter Storm Uri in 2021. That's now a $12 adder on everybody's bill. And there were several ways that that could have been handled at the PUC and by Excel that they weren't. So these are complicated negotiations, and this is, I think, a big part of what the next mayor has to do to protect customers, in this case, with the agreement with Excel. And I have a huge amount of professional experience doing that. I've done that for years at the state legislature and have delivered over and over for our customers in the state.
I'm getting a crash course in this in the last few weeks, but I believe the franchise fee is the agreement with Excel that you can have use of the right-of-way without keep coming back to the city for permission. You can dig underground, use our right-of-way. Boulder tried to get out of the Excel business around the time of the franchise agreement. That didn't work out so good with Boulder. How is it going to work out better with Denver?
Yeah, I don't think it's about driving what Boulder was trying to do, which is a municipalization conversation, and that's a worthy conversation. But it leads to lots of unintended consequences, which I think Boulder found out the hard way. What I'm saying is the next mayor is that we've got a chance to really improve the relationship with Excel and drive lower and lower costs. And the thing we haven't talked about at all tonight is how do we improve the environmental performance of Denver, lower the emissions, improve air quality. The brown cloud is still over our heads. And one of the best ways to do that is to make sure you've got the right conditions in place with the utilities. Denver has a multi-billion-dollar opportunity to electrify our transportation, heat pumps for heating and cooling. It drastically lowers customers' bills. That's the kind of negotiation we need to have with Excel.
Thank you.
Leslie Herod, a big concern with affordable housing is also climate change and how to make living greener affordable to everyone, not just the rich. So what is your vision for city planning that would be addressing environmental injustice?
Absolutely. I think that's a great question. And my colleague mentioned the brown cloud that we live in here. And as someone with asthma, as someone like many folks out there whose kids have asthma today, we know that Denver is not the cleanest city in the nation to live in. Our air quality on a summer day, if we go outside and I go out and walk my dog, it's akin to smoking 1 to 2 packs of cigarettes a day. And I don't smoke. That's unacceptable. We've got to hold these gross polluters accountable, period. That's the #1 priority. When we know the health outcomes in North Denver by I-70, by the Suncor, right? We know what's happened to those families. We know the poor health outcomes because of living next to that pollution. We need to address it. We need to address it. We need to hold those gross polluters accountable, #1. Affordable housing does not mean that it has to go in places that are unsafe to live in. That's been a way that this country has done things for too long, where black, brown, and low-income folks have lived right next to polluters because it was affordable. I disagree. Park Hill should have affordable housing. Should have affordable housing. People who live in Park Hill right now, their kids should be able to buy in Park Hill when they're ready to, and we can do that.
Thank you.
So I feel like I get to respond to that because that was aimed at me.
Because she mentioned a neighborhood you did?
No.
I'm going to back up. I'm going to involve everybody in this one. I'm going to back up from what Leslie Herod just mentioned. We've talked about it a few times, Global Elyria Swansea neighborhood. That area deals with the environmental impact of the Suncor refinery, one of Colorado's largest polluters. So I'm a novice at this, but please raise your hand if you would put pressure on state and federal regulators to put additional environmental restrictions on the Suncor refinery. Universally, everybody has raised their hand. Ian, Tafoya, what specifically would you be seeking?
Well, I just want to start out by saying a couple things, because when you brought up GES before, we talk a lot about public safety. There are people living in our communities who aren't safe to breathe their air. It's not safe to drink their water. It's not safe to cross the street to a bus stop because of the infrastructure we've built. I also want to say that people talk a lot about Suncor. Across the street from Suncor is the Cherokee gas plant, directly connected to Xcel Energy, and it's connected to a network with Comanche gas plant in Pueblo, Colorado. The city of Denver didn't do enough to say we got to shut down these facilities and we have to move to new processes, especially for Comanche, which is a predominantly Latino community as well. We put pressure on them. We marched for days on Xcel Energy. We can leverage them. The state and federal, we've been doing the work, and I would love it if more people would join us in it. I want to be also clear, Suncor gets a lot of the attention. There are 189 businesses violating federal environmental law in North Denver. I wrote this report and released it last year. We sued over I-70. We've learned about the cumulative pollution. Some of the things we can do immediately around Suncor, they have flaring. We can stop the flaring. We can make sure that we're holding them accountable for the benzene that they're emitting. They're in the middle of a water permit right now. There's still an opportunity for you guys to get involved.
Debbie Ortega, sitting on City Council, I'm sure some of this has come in front of you. What specifically have you done, and what would you do to go after state and federal regulation on Suncor or other polluters?
So I want to talk about a couple other projects as well. So I led working with the global community to deal with the Asarco cleanup, which contaminated the soils in that neighborhood. It also resulted in one of the largest class action lawsuits and settled that did the cleanup of the soils in the neighborhood to a greater degree than what the state had been negotiating with that company. These neighborhoods have been in the shadows of I-70. They've been dealing with the pollution from that project for many years. My office alone submitted 40 pages of comments to the environmental impact statement that was all focused on mitigating the impact of the environmental effects of that project. They were all funded except trees, and the community was successful coming back later to get that done. With Suncor, as a council person that used to represent that district, this is how far back that pollution has gone. I have worked with those communities to address that issue and continue to do that.
Thank you.
I'm not hearing you address what you're doing with state or federal regulators. We have a huge opportunity right now with Yadira Caraveo, a public health professional becoming a congresswoman. Representative DeGette and I have worked very closely on this issue. I haven't seen you in those dialogues. And we talk about mitigation. Our communities wanted opposition, and the only reason we were able to get what we wanted is because we were opposite. You've chosen to broker this middle deal when the communities that want justice want justice.
Well, let me
please let her respond.
Example of part of that mitigation. We were able to get $2 million to replace the housing that was taken. This was a state project, right? It wasn't a city project. So we were successful getting some of that housing replaced. We worked on making sure the homes that were left in the neighborhood had mitigation to prevent the dust and the air pollution from coming into their neighborhood with new windows and doors. I mean, I could go on with the list, but there were many things that happened as a result of fighting to make sure that that project was being mitigated, knowing full well that City Council and the mayor had supported the project to move forward as it had been planned. We were looking at a whole different way of addressing that problem by routing that traffic away from those neighborhoods. I wasn't successful in getting that done through a proclamation that was brought to City Council.
Rerouting is not fair, Debbie, because now you're saying that the brown communities in Commerce City deserve the pollution instead of the people in Denver. We have to have solutions that regionally bring people together and do not create sacrifice zones because we don't want to hear. That's more of the not in my backyard mentality.
Thank you.
We had better solutions.
15 seconds to wrap back up if you like.
This was a community process that everybody got to participate and weigh in. The decisions were made at the state and federal level to fund and move forward with that project. We're stuck with what they approved, but my focus was trying to mitigate the impact on those neighbors as best we could.
Thank you. Thank you. So I think we saw universal agreement about the idea of pushing state and federal regulators to take stricter action against Suncor. A clarification, Kelly Brough, when you were the head of the Denver Metro Chamber of Commerce, was Suncor a member when you represented their interests? Were they part of that?
Suncor was one of the 3,000 members.
Got it. So I have a question more generally about how you balance business interests and interests of citizens in Denver, if you believe there is a balance. Are there specific policies that you push for as the head of the chamber that you now would not pursue if you were mayor of Denver, or do you believe that what's good for business is good for citizens?
I think often there is alignment between what is good for business. The examples I'd give you is in 2020, when we were in the pandemic and in a crisis, what we found is being able to get resources to those businesses allowed them to keep employees on staff and allowed our communities to get through the crisis. So that'd be one example. But I think, yeah.
So I actually asked you for examples of the opposite, which is areas where the business interests don't align with the interests of the citizens as a whole. Do you have any examples of those?
Not that I can think of.
Okay, thank you.
I've got one. Paid family leave.
Yeah, I'd be happy to talk about paid family leave.
I would love to hear that.
Environmental laws.
So,
no, hold on. Let's have the discussion about paid family leave, which you opposed when you were at the Denver Metro Chamber of Commerce. Why was that the right position?
Yeah. So first, I start by saying strong support for paid family leave, but we were negotiating at the Capitol on what that leave would look like, and then it was referred to the ballot. And policy does matter here. The paid family leave that was referred to the ballot, one example would be the lowest paid worker in our region never will receive 100% of their pay, and yet they will pay out of their paycheck every single month. And we know you can't live on the lowest pay you receive today in our region. So this notion that you could take paid family leave without having 100% of your pay, I still disagree. I think that is bad policy, and now the employee pays for it. I think we could have done much better by the workers.
Kwame Spearman.
Well, I can tell you, one of the hardest things that workers have to deal with is when they are not working, they are not getting paid. And the simple fact is, if you support our employees, quite frankly, if you support women who have to take time off from jobs to raise their kids, to give birth, then you support paid family leave. Yeah, and it's unconscionable to me that was something, excuse me?
I provided it to my employees. Not because the state.
But you didn't want it to be a state law. I mean, that's the definition.
It wasn't good
Kelly,
policy.
that's the definition of privilege, that you would give something to your employees that you wouldn't compel other people to get throughout the state. It's a huge issue when we're thinking about equality and how we have equitable outcomes, that someone who runs a business or runs a not-for-profit, that has 3,000 members is advocating that we should not support people when they have to take time off of work.
But I got to clarify.
Please respond.
That wasn't what we were advocating. We were actually advocating.
You didn't support the policy.
Tommy, please let her speak.
We were advocating that it should be provided, and it should be, and for me personally, it should be 100% of pay. Otherwise, the employee can't use it. That's my objection to the state law.
I just want to say,
Thank you.
someone who was
Actually,
in the
the next
legislature.
question is for you, and I have no doubt that you can shoehorn it into the answer if you would like to.
Leslie Harrod, when people go to your mayoral website, they see a lot of full plans coming soon for everything from housing to economic development to climate sustainability. Why aren't those details out to voters yet?
Yeah, so we released another plan today. I don't know if you saw the release we sent to you on public health, and we are rolling out more plans as we speak, again, to Denverites, It's about having conversations with people in the city and then delivering on those promises and on those conversations. I've passed over 150 pieces of legislation into law since I've been in the legislature. Most of those ideas came from the people of Denver. I didn't steal them. I did my job. I delivered. Now, and I just want to add, as a legislator, during the time when paid family leave was negotiated, and you can look it up, the chamber was not in strong support of paid family leave. In fact, if you talk to my colleagues that negotiated that bill multiple times, the chamber was part of the #1 opposition to providing paid family leave to the people of Denver, the workers of Denver that needed it. And it's true. If you're someone that has a flexible job, a salaried income, you're able to have the opportunity to take that time off and still get your wages. But it's the workers of Denver that don't have that, and we know that that's wrong, and we know we can do better.
We did see the public health plan as well, and we're waiting on the other details.
Thank you. Chris Hansen, you're running on your educational background in a way other candidates are not, saying, quote, I went to MIT and Oxford to study how to solve big problems. Why does that make you more qualified to run the city than Leslie Herod, who went to CU Boulder, or Debbie Ortega, who got a business certificate from Barnes Business College?
Go Buffs.
Go Roadrunners.
So, Marshall, I wanted to make sure that folks knew about my background. It was something I've been sharing about my family story. I've been sharing about my upbringing. I've been sharing about my chance to study and to learn about complex problems. I think those are all relevant as we think about our qualifications to take on the most important job in Denver. And so that's what I was really trying to do. So you can pick that out. I was trying to put that out there with my total experience, my chance to live and work overseas, my multi-ethnic, multiracial family, my biracial kids, right? It's all part of the complexity that we bring to this job. And that's really why I was sharing it, to make sure folks knew that I had that background. And look, I mentioned the fact that I'm an engineer in this campaign because I think I've had that training and that experience in the public and private sector to solve tough problems. And that's what we've seen, and that's what we're seeing in Denver right now. And I think it's relevant to make sure that I can share that with the voters.
Thank you.
Terrance Roberts, in 30 seconds, can you talk about empowering RTD to become a safe 24/7 operation? The new RTD police chief wants to triple the number of sworn officers. Is tripling the number of RTD police the way to make it safer?
No, I don't think that's the way. For one, Denver does not govern RTD. They have their own governance, their own elected board officials. So let me put that out there. So that's for one. For two, to stop people from committing crimes, once again, it's poverty. Putting more police on our streets, police driving up and down the street or sitting on the bus, that's not going to make people not want to commit crimes. Police come after the wife is beaten. Police come after the drive-by shooting has happened at East High School on 17th, okay? We need to make sure people don't want to commit crimes. So no, I don't think that's a good plan.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for an incredibly substantive 2-hour discussion, a lot of strong ideas, a lot of strong personalities, but you managed to have a civil discussion. That brings us to the end of the first of 3 mayoral debates we'll be holding on 9 News. If you joined us partway through, the full debate will be streaming on 9 News Plus and on the 9 News YouTube channel. The second of our 3 debates is March 14th, right as ballots go out for voters. Right now, you can find more in-depth information about all these candidates on 9news.com as well in our interactive guide that you can sort by candidate or by issue. Thank you to the candidates for being here tonight, even though you were legally required by the Fair Elections Fund. Thank you to our audience, our partners at MSU Denver, Claro, and the Fair Elections Fund. Good night.